What if I told you that there's a single sentence, just one simple phrase, that could completely transform your relationship with money and abundance? Imagine for a moment that everything you've been taught about manifesting wealth has been slightly off track, not entirely wrong, but missing one crucial element that makes all the difference between those who succeed and those who keep struggling, despite their best efforts. There was a man who walked into Joseph Murphy's office years ago, and his story might sound eerily familiar to you. He was exhausted, not from lack of trying, but from trying too much. He had attended every seminar, purchased every program, filled notebooks with affirmations, created vision boards that covered his walls, and practiced visualization techniques until his mind felt numb. Yet despite all this effort, despite following every instruction from every teacher he could find, he remained exactly where he started, watching others seemingly effortlessly receive what he desperately prayed for. Has this ever happened to you? Have you ever felt like you're doing everything right, yet the universe seems to be responding to everyone else but you? But before we begin, please hit the like button and let me know where in the world you're watching from today. It's always fascinating seeing who's joining us from around the world. And if you haven't already, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any of our future videos. Here's what makes this story absolutely remarkable. Murphy didn't give this exhausted seeker another technique to master. He didn't hand him a complex ritual or a 30-day program with multiple steps to memorize. Instead, he gave him one sentence, just one simple phrase, and told him to fall asleep with it each night, as though it were the last breath he would ever take. The man looked at Murphy with a mixture of desperation and disbelief. How could a single sentence accomplish what years of dedicated effort had failed to achieve? But something extraordinary happened. Within 3 weeks, money began flowing into this man's life through channels he never knew existed. An inheritance from a relative he'd never met. Business opportunities that appeared out of nowhere. A series of events so perfectly orchestrated that calling them coincidence would be insulting to the intelligence of the universe itself. Stay with me until the end, because what you're about to discover might completely reshape how you understand the creative power that's been dwelling within you all along. You see, this teaching isn't really about money at all. That might sound contradictory when we're talking about winning lotteries and manifesting abundance, but here's the profound truth that most people miss entirely. The visible world you see around you, with all its bills and bank accounts and financial pressures, is merely a shadow. It's a reflection of something far more powerful, something that exists within the invisible realm of your own consciousness. When you learn to speak from a state of fulfillment, rather than from a state of wanting, when you understand how to claim what's already yours, rather than begging for what you think you lack, everything changes. What was the sentence Murphy gave him? And more importantly, why did it work when everything else had failed? The answer lies in understanding something about consciousness that most people have never been taught. Something that might actually offend you when you first hear it. Because here's the uncomfortable truth that nobody wants to say out loud. The universe is not a meritocracy. Wealth does not flow to those who work the hardest, sacrifice the most, or deserve it the most. Wealth flows to the consciousness that claims it. And that claim has nothing to do with your resume, your background, or how many hours you've logged in pursuit of your dreams. This is where most people's entire belief system starts to crack. We've been conditioned since childhood to believe that good things come to those who earn them, that prosperity is the reward for effort and virtue. But if that were true, why do some people work 3 jobs and still struggle to pay rent, while others seem to stumble into fortune without breaking a sweat? The difference isn't in their effort or their moral character. The difference is in their state of consciousness, in what they've claimed as their identity at the deepest level of their being. The claim that the universe recognizes isn't spoken with your lips. You can say affirmations all day long. You can post inspirational quotes on your wall. You can declare your intentions to the sky. But if your inner state contradicts those words, nothing changes. The only claim that matters is made with your imagination, with the feeling of already being the person who has what you desire. This is the hidden truth behind every manifestation success story you've ever heard. The secret ingredient that was there all along, but never quite explained clearly enough. Now, I want to go even deeper into this transformation of understanding, because what I'm about to share completely reverses how most people approach abundance. The fundamental reframe is this: you never attract what you want, you attract what you are. Read that again and let it sink in. Most teachings tell you to focus on what you want, to visualize the car or the house or the bank account, to create detailed mental movies of your desired reality. But Joseph Murphy taught something far more powerful and far more immediate. There is no separate universe out there that you need to petition or convince or negotiate with. There is only one power, and that power is the I am within you. If this resonated with you, subscribe to the channel. There's so much more to explore about consciousness and manifestation, and I don't want you to miss what's coming. What you assume yourself to be, you must become. Not what you hope to be someday, not what you're working toward. What you assume yourself to be right now, in this present moment, is what gets reflected back to you in your external circumstances. The journey isn't about acquiring something you don't have. It's about recognizing what you've always been, but forgot in the midst of chasing and striving and comparing yourself to others. Your decisions about who you are create your reality far more powerfully than your decisions about what you want. Write in the comments, I am ready to claim it, if this is starting to shift something in how you see yourself and your relationship with abundance. This is where the real transformation happens, where the mechanics behind the magic finally become clear. An assumption is something that might look completely false to your logical mind. Your bank account might show one number, your circumstances might scream a different reality. But here's what changes everything. If you persist in an assumption, even one that contradicts every sensory fact you can see and touch, that assumption will harden into fact. This isn't motivational philosophy or spiritual metaphor. This is the operational law by which all things come into being, the hidden mechanism that's been running your life, whether you knew it or not. When you use this law consciously, deliberately, with full awareness of what you're doing, something remarkable happens. The world around you begins to rearrange itself to match your inner conviction, not slowly, not eventually, but with breathtaking speed and precision. People appear who can help you. Opportunities emerge from nowhere. Doors open that you didn't even know existed. The universe becomes responsive in a way that seems almost magical, but it's not magic at all. It's law, as reliable as gravity, as consistent as mathematics. But here's where most people get tripped up, where the subtle but crucial distinction makes all the difference. Popular teachers tell you to visualize your desire, to create mental movies of what you want, to picture yourself receiving the money or the success or the relationship. Joseph Murphy taught something fundamentally different. He told people to dwell in the end, to live from the state of already having rather than hoping to have. Do you see the profound shift in that? One approach is begging, the other is commanding. One is hoping, the other is knowing. One is waiting for something to happen in the future. The other is recognizing it has already happened in the only place where anything can truly happen first, your imagination. They tell you to raise your vibration, to get into a positive emotional state, to feel good about what you're asking for. But Murphy's teaching goes deeper. He tells you to change your state of consciousness, to become the person who already has what you desire. It's not about feeling temporarily excited about a future possibility. It's about fundamentally shifting your identity, your sense of self, your answer to the question, who am I? When that inner state changes, when you stop being someone who wants wealth and become someone who is wealthy in consciousness, the external journey takes care of itself. This impact on your reality isn't gradual or uncertain. It's immediate and absolute, operating behind the scenes of your awareness every single moment. The revelations keep unfolding. When you truly grasp this distinction, when you stop trying to attract from a place of lack and start claiming from a place of fullness. If this is clicking for you, write in the comments, "I'm dwelling in the end now, so I can see who's making this shift in their understanding." The shift in understanding deepens even further when you realize what imagination actually is. Most people think imagination is just fantasy, daydreaming, mental entertainment with no real power. But that's one of the greatest misunderstandings of our time. Imagination is the creative workshop of God Himself, located precisely behind your forehead in the sanctuary of your own consciousness. This is the place where no one else can enter, where no one else can create but you. It's your private domain of absolute creative authority, and what happens there has more impact on your reality than anything happening in the external world. Think about that for a moment. You have a space within you that is completely sovereign, completely yours, where you are the ultimate decision maker and creator. Every external thing you see around you, every building, every invention, every relationship, every fortune, began first as an image in someone's consciousness. The visible world is the result of invisible assumptions that hardened into form. This isn't mystical thinking. It's the hidden truth behind every manifestation that has ever occurred. Joseph Murphy proved this in his own life in a way that makes the principle undeniable. In 1943, he found himself stationed at an army camp in Louisiana, desperate to return to his life and his calling. He applied for a discharge through all the proper channels, following every regulation, respecting every protocol. Within 4 hours, his application came back with a single word stamped across it: disapproved. By every standard of reason, by every measure of worldly power, his case was closed. The commanding officer's decision was final. There was no appeal, no leverage, no connections he could use. But Murphy understood something that most people never discover. He turned within. Each night, lying in his bunk in that Louisiana camp, he didn't visualize himself receiving a discharge. That would have been thinking about his desire, staying in the state of wanting. Instead, he imagined himself already home in New York. He felt the sheets of his own bed. He heard the familiar sounds of his apartment. He smelled the air of the city he loved. He didn't merely picture these things as distant possibilities. He transported his awareness completely, entering that reality so fully that it became more real to him than the army barracks surrounding his physical body. And critically, he fell asleep in that state, letting his last conscious thoughts be saturated with the feeling of already being home. This behind-the-scenes work, this invisible transformation happening in his consciousness while his external circumstances screamed. Impossibility was setting forces in motion that would soon become undeniable. Write in the comments, "I'm turning within," if you're understanding the power of this inner journey and ready to test it in your own life. Within days of Murphy maintaining this inner state, something inexplicable happened. The same colonel who had firmly rejected his application called him into his office. Murphy sat across from the man who held institutional power over his fate, and what the colonel said revealed the hidden mechanics of consciousness at work. He told Murphy, with a strange expression on his face, that he personally disagreed with discharges of this kind. He had strong objections to granting the request. Everything in his training, his position, his authority said no, and then he said something that demonstrates this law perfectly. Despite all his objections, despite everything he believed about protocol and regulations, he felt compelled to approve the application. He couldn't explain why. There was no logical reason. No external pressure had been applied. The decision came from somewhere beyond his conscious understanding. Within hours, Murphy was a civilian. Within days, he was on a train bound for New York. The entire army, with all its regulations, all its hierarchy, all its institutional power, had rearranged itself to match his assumption. The colonel had become an instrument of Murphy's consciousness, moved by forces he couldn't see or understand. This is the revelation that changes everything about how you approach any challenge or desire in your life. The external circumstances, no matter how rigid they appear, are always responsive to the internal state. This is the profound truth behind every transformation story you've ever heard. You don't change the world by working on the world. You change it by working on yourself, by shifting your state of consciousness. You don't move mountains by pushing against them with physical effort or willpower or strategy. You move mountains by moving to a state of consciousness where the mountain has already been moved, where the obstacle no longer exists in your awareness. From that state, what seemed impossible becomes inevitable. The journey isn't about forcing change in your external reality. It's about making a fundamental decision about who you are in your internal reality. The impact of this understanding cannot be overstated. People spend years, sometimes entire lifetimes, trying to manipulate circumstances, convince people, gather resources, build leverage. But all of that is working backwards. The true power lies in the behind-the-scenes work of consciousness, in the invisible realm where assumptions harden into facts, where states of being attract corresponding circumstances with mathematical precision. When you grasp this, truly grasp it at a level deeper than intellectual understanding, your entire approach to life transforms. You stop fighting against what is and start living from what you've decided to be. If this is resonating with you, write in the comments. Consciousness is the key, so I can see who's having this breakthrough moment. This principle works just as powerfully when circumstances feel unjust, when you've been wronged, when the world seems stacked against you. There was a young man whose father had been betrayed by business partners, men he had trusted for years. They manipulated contracts, spread lies about his character, used every underhanded tactic available to force him out of the company he had helped build. By the time the devastation settled, this once prosperous man found himself stripped of his business, his reputation, nearly all his money. He was left with barely enough to rent a small shop on a side street, far from the gleaming building where he had once been a principal owner. The son watched this injustice unfold and was called home from college to help his father start over. Each day he walked past that building that had been stolen from his family. The massive sign bearing the names of the betrayers dominated the commercial district, a constant reminder of what had been taken. Most people in his position would have been consumed by bitterness, by thoughts of revenge, by resignation to defeat. But this young man understood something about consciousness that transformed his entire approach. As he walked past that building day after day, he didn't see the names of the betrayers on that sign. In his imagination, he saw his own family name in bold letters across the entrance. He didn't wish for it someday in the future. He felt it as a present reality, felt the pride of ownership, felt the satisfaction of justice restored, felt himself walking through those doors as the rightful owner. If you found value in this, hit that like button. It helps this message reach others who are ready to hear it. He maintained this assumption with unwavering persistence for months. The external circumstances hadn't changed. The building still belonged to others, but his internal state was unshakable. He had made a decision about reality that went deeper than physical facts. Then something remarkable happened that demonstrates the hidden mechanics of how consciousness orchestrates circumstances. A wealthy stranger, a man the family had never met, approached them with a proposition. He wanted to finance their acquisition of the very building that had been stolen. This stranger wasn't coincidence. This is what Murphy calls a bridge of incidents, a person or event that appears in your external world because they are required by your inner assumption. The son's imagination had created a necessity, and the universe produced the fulfillment of that necessity through channels that could never have been predicted or planned. The revelation here is profound. You don't need to know how your desire will be fulfilled. You don't need to figure out the path or manipulate the circumstances. Your only task is to maintain the assumption, to live in the end, and reality will arrange the details with an intelligence far greater than your conscious mind could orchestrate. Write in the comments, "I'm maintaining my assumption," if you're seeing how persistence in consciousness creates these seemingly miraculous bridges in your own life. The beauty of this law becomes even more clear when you see it working through pure, uncomplicated faith. A 9-year-old boy attended one of Murphy's lectures with his grandmother. While the adults were absorbed in the complex explanations of consciousness and manifestation, the boy sat quietly playing with a toy truck. But he was listening, absorbing the core principle in a way that only a child can, without the filters and doubts that adults carry. When they were leaving, the boy looked up at Murphy with absolute certainty in his eyes and said he knew what he wanted, and now he knew how to get it. A puppy. The grandmother immediately protested. The boy's father had an absolute prohibition against dogs. He deeply disliked them, had made it crystal clear that a dog would never be allowed in their home. There was no logical path to this desire. It was, by all reasonable standards, impossible. But the boy didn't concern himself with impossibility or logic or his father's firmly stated position. He had heard the secret, and he intended to use it. Each night as he fell asleep, he simply imagined himself walking his dog. He felt the leash in his hand, heard the panting beside him, experienced the companionship as if it already existed. He didn't beg God for the dog. He didn't try to convince his parents. He didn't create elaborate plans to change his father's mind. He just lived with the dog in his imagination, making it so real that the distinction between inner and outer reality dissolved. 6 weeks later, the father came home one evening carrying a puppy. The same man who had always hated dogs, who had expressly forbidden his son from having one, walked through the door with exactly what the boy had been living in consciousness. When asked why, the father couldn't explain it. He had been walking past a pet store, felt an inexplicable compulsion to go inside, saw a particular puppy and knew it belonged to his son. He fought the impulse, reminded himself of all his reasons for not wanting a dog, but the compulsion was irresistible. This is consciousness at work, rearranging the decisions and actions of others to match an inner assumption. What did this 9-year-old understand that most adults have forgotten in their journey through life? He didn't analyze the law or question whether it would work or worry about doing the technique correctly. He simply assumed with natural faith that the dog was already his. Children are masters of assumption because they don't pretend, they become. Watch a child play and you'll see this truth in action. A child with a cardboard box isn't pretending to drive a car in his imagination. He is driving a car. A little girl with a plastic crown isn't playing at being a princess in her consciousness. She is a princess. They don't question whether their assumptions are realistic or possible. They just assume, and in the world of imagination, that assumption is the fact. If you're recognizing how much you need to return to this childlike state of simple, unquestioning faith, write in the comments, "I'm becoming childlike again," and let that be your declaration of this transformation. Somewhere along the way, you were told to grow up, to be realistic, to stop living in imagination. And in accepting that teaching, you abandoned the very power that could transform your life. But there's something even more fundamental happening behind the scenes of your consciousness that most people never become aware of. Right now, at this very moment, you are speaking. Not out loud, but internally. There's a voice inside you that never stops, a constant stream of commentary running beneath the surface of your awareness. It's evaluating everything you see, judging every experience, telling you who you are and what you deserve and what's possible for you and what isn't. This inner speech is not passive observation. Every word that voice speaks is a seed being planted in the fertile soil of your subconscious mind. When that voice says, "I am poor," it's not describing a fact about your bank account. It's issuing a command, creating a blueprint that your subconscious must follow. When it says, "I will never get ahead," it's not making a pessimistic observation. It's writing the script for your future. When it says, "Money always flows to everyone except me," it's not voicing a complaint. It's establishing the pattern that your life must conform to. This is the hidden truth that explains why some people remain stuck despite genuine effort, while others seem to effortlessly flow into abundance. This is also why affirmations fail so spectacularly for most people. A man stands before his mirror each morning and declares out loud, "I am wealthy, I am prosperous, money flows to me easily and abundantly." He's following the instructions he learned from books and programs. But while his lips are moving with these positive words, his inner voice is shouting something completely different. "This is ridiculous. Look at my bank account. Who am I trying to fool? I can't even pay this month's bills and I'm standing here lying to myself." The affirmation he's speaking aloud is a whisper. The inner speech of doubt and disbelief is a shout. And the subconscious mind, which is the creative power that actually builds your reality, hears only the shout. This reveals the fundamental flaw in how most manifestation techniques are taught. They focus on the words you say, the images you visualize, the actions you take. But true transformation requires something deeper. It requires speaking from a changed state of consciousness, not just repeating different words from the same state of lack. The journey isn't about learning new affirmations. It's about making a fundamental decision about who you are at a level so deep that your inner speech naturally aligns with that new identity without effort or discipline. If this is revealing why your previous attempts haven't worked and you're seeing what needs to shift, write in the comments, "My inner speech is changing," as your commitment to this deeper level of transformation. This understanding leads directly to the revelation of what that single sentence actually was, the one Murphy gave to the exhausted seeker at the beginning of our story. The sentence that transforms everything isn't, "I want to be wealthy." It's, "I am wealthy." Not, "I hope to win," but, "It is done." Do you see the fundamental difference in those statements? The first sentence reaches towards something not yet possessed, implying distance between you and your desire. The second sentence claims something already received, collapsing that distance to zero. The first is the beggar's prayer, spoken from outside the gates hoping for scraps. The second is the king's proclamation, spoken from the throne with absolute authority. Most people spend their entire lives praying the beggar's prayer, asking for what they don't have, hoping that someday circumstances will shift in their favor. But the transformation happens the moment you shift from begging to proclaiming, from hoping to knowing, from "I want" to "I am." This isn't arrogance or delusion. This is recognizing a truth that has always been there, hidden in plain sight, waiting for you to remember it. There's an ancient parable that captures this perfectly. A father says to his son, "Son, thou art ever with me, and all that I have is thine." You have never been cast out. You have never been disinherited. You have never been deemed unworthy of the abundance that surrounds you. You simply forgot. You forgot that you live in the Father's house, and the Father's house has always been overflowing with every good thing imaginable. The poverty, the lack, the struggle, all of it was a dream you were having while living in abundance. The recognition of this truth is the key that unlocks everything. This isn't about earning or deserving or becoming worthy enough. It's about remembering what has always been true. The journey from poverty consciousness to abundance consciousness isn't about traveling somewhere new. It's about waking up and seeing where you've always been. When you truly grasp this, when it moves from intellectual concept into lived experience, your entire relationship with money and success and opportunity transforms. You stop chasing and start claiming. You stop begging and start commanding. You stop hoping for a future fulfillment and start living from a present completion. The impact of this shift cannot be measured in simple terms because it changes everything about how you move through the world. Your decisions come from a different place. Your inner speech naturally aligns with abundance. Your assumptions about what's possible expand exponentially. And behind the scenes, in ways you can't always track or understand, reality begins rearranging itself to match this new state of being. If you're feeling this shift happening, write in the comments, "I remember now," because that simple phrase carries the power of this entire revelation within it. The question then becomes practical. How do you actually change that inner speech that's been running on autopilot for years or decades? The answer is simpler than you might think, but it requires understanding something crucial. You don't change inner speech by trying to control every thought or police every word. You change inner speech by changing the state from which you speak. A man standing in a pit cannot speak the language of someone standing on a mountaintop, no matter how hard he tries. His words might mimic the mountain tears, but his perspective, his feeling, his entire being radiates the pit, and the subconscious mind knows the difference immediately because it doesn't hear your words, it feels your state. This is the hidden mechanism that determines your entire experience of reality. What you are being determines what you attract, not what you are wanting or saying or doing. If you're being a person who lacks money, even while you're visualizing abundance, you'll attract more lack. If you're being a person who already has abundance, even when your bank account doesn't reflect it yet, you'll attract the manifestation of that state. The journey isn't about changing your circumstances first and then feeling abundant. It's about changing your state of being first and then watching circumstances rearrange themselves to match. So here's the question that unlocks everything, the question that creates an immediate shift in your consciousness if you're willing to actually engage with it honestly. Ask yourself right now, how would I feel if my wish were already fulfilled? Not someday in the future, right now. If you knew with absolute certainty that the money, the success, the abundance you desire was already yours, guaranteed, done, completed, how would you feel in this moment? Would you be anxious about tomorrow? Would you be striving and calculating and trying to figure out how to make it happen? Or would you be relaxed, peaceful, grateful, secure in the knowing that all is well? Feel that feeling right now as a present reality, not as a future possibility. Don't imagine feeling that way when the money arrives. Feel that way now, before any external evidence appears. This is what assuming a state of consciousness actually means, and the state of consciousness is the only reality that matters. Everything visible in your external world is just the shadow, the echo, the delayed reflection of states you've held in the past. When you change your state now, you're not changing what is, you're changing what will be. Because the state you hold now is creating the circumstances you'll experience next. The transformation happening in this moment, as you actually feel into this question rather than just thinking about it, is setting forces in motion that operate behind the scenes of your awareness with precision and intelligence, far beyond what your conscious mind could orchestrate. Write in the comments, "I feel it now," if you're actually experiencing this shift, rather than just understanding it intellectually, because that distinction is everything. Now let me share with you the actual phrase that Murphy gave to that exhausted seeker, the one sentence that changed everything. It's beautifully simple, almost deceptively so. Isn't it wonderful? Just those 3 words, repeated with genuine feeling as you're drifting off to sleep. The genius of this phrase lies in what it does to your consciousness. It saturates your entire being with satisfied fulfillment without specifying exactly what has happened. It doesn't limit the ways your good can come to you or restrict the channels through which abundance can flow. And most importantly, it bypasses the critical mind completely because there's nothing concrete for that analytical voice to argue with. When you say, "I have $1 million," your rational mind immediately jumps in with objections and evidence to the contrary. But when you say, "Isn't it wonderful?" with genuine feeling, you're not making a claim that can be disputed. You're exclaiming in response to something marvelous that has already happened in your consciousness. You're speaking from the end, from the state of fulfillment, from the place where your desire is already fact. The question itself implies that something wonderful has occurred, and in asking it with feeling, you're experiencing the emotional reality of that fulfillment right now. The practical application of this technique happens in a specific moment, one that occurs every single night, whether you use it consciously or let it pass by unconsciously. As you lie in bed feeling that drowsy heaviness descending upon your body, as your mind begins to drift between waking and sleeping, that's when you repeat this phrase silently with feeling. Isn't it wonderful? Isn't it wonderful? Let your subconscious mind fill in the blank with your heart's deepest desire. You don't need to specify what's wonderful. Your deeper mind already knows what you truly want, what you've been longing for, what would transform your life if it manifested. Feel the wonder of it. Feel the gratitude bubbling up as if the thing you desire has just appeared in your life. Feel the delicious satisfaction of a wish fulfilled, a prayer answered, a dream realized. Let this feeling saturate your consciousness so completely that for those moments before sleep, there's no room for doubt or worry or calculation. You're simply dwelling in the wonder of something marvelous that has happened. This becomes your last conscious thought as you drift into sleep, the final impression you make upon your subconscious mind before surrendering to the creative depths where all transformation originates. The impact of this simple practice, done consistently night after night, creates a behind-the-scenes shift in your consciousness that ripples outward into your entire life, changing decisions you make, opportunities you notice, and bridges of incidents that appear. If you're going to try this tonight, write in the comments, "Isn't it wonderful?" and feel the power of those words as you type them, because even that act is planting a seed. While "Isn't it wonderful" works powerfully for many people, the beauty of this principle is that you can find the phrase that resonates most deeply with your own consciousness. Some people discover immense power in saying, "Thank you, Father," as they drift off to sleep, expressing gratitude for something that has already been given rather than something they're hoping to receive. Others find that the simple declaration, "It is done," creates an immediate shift in their state, a sense of completion and finality that dissolves all striving and worry. And then there's a phrase that works brilliantly for those who struggle with believing something that contradicts current circumstances. I remember when I used to worry about money. This last one is particularly clever because it implies that the worry is gone, that you're looking back from a position of security upon a past. version of yourself who hadn't yet realized the abundance that was always there? The specific words you choose matter far less than the feeling they evoke in you. Your task is to find the sentence that creates the strongest feeling of fulfillment, the one that most effectively transports you from a state of wanting to a state of having, from hoping to knowing, from reaching toward to resting in. The key is speaking from the end rather than toward it, and this distinction transforms how you phrase everything in your inner dialogue. Instead of saying, "I want to be rich," which assumes you're not, and creates a perpetual state of wanting, you would say, "I am so grateful for this overflow," which assumes abundance is already present and you're simply appreciating it. Instead of "money is coming to me," which assumes it hasn't arrived yet and keeps it perpetually in the future, you would say, "I love being able to give so generously," which assumes you already have enough to share. Instead of "I am manifesting abundance," which assumes it's still in process and not yet complete, you would say, "Everything I touch prospers," which assumes the state of prosperity is your current reality. These aren't just different ways of saying the same thing, they're different states of consciousness entirely. One set of phrases keeps you locked in lack while pretending to pursue abundance. The other set places you immediately in abundance and lets circumstances catch up to your state. The journey from poverty to prosperity isn't about accumulating more things or changing external conditions first. It's about making a fundamental decision about who you are being right now, in this moment, regardless of what your senses report. When you speak from the end consistently, when your inner dialogue naturally flows from a state of having rather than wanting, you create an invisible shift that has visible consequences. The decisions you make change. The opportunities you notice multiply. The people who can help you appear seemingly out of nowhere. Behind the scenes, reality is reorganizing itself to match your new state. If you've found your phrase or you're experimenting to discover which one works best for you, write in the comments, "I'm speaking from the end," so we can track this transformation together. Now, understanding the power of these phrases is one thing, but implementing them consistently requires a practice that Murphy called the mental diet. Before you can successfully plant the seeds of abundance in your consciousness, you must first starve the weeds of poverty thinking that have been growing there for years. This isn't about positive thinking or pretending everything is perfect. It's about becoming aware of the constant stream of inner speech that's been running automatically, creating your reality without your conscious consent. The practice is simple, but demands vigilance. You begin observing your inner speech continuously throughout the day, catching yourself in the act of creating limitation. When you notice yourself thinking or saying something that implies lack, insufficiency, or unworthiness, you stop, not with judgment, not with frustration at yourself for having the thought, but with gentle awareness. You simply refuse to complete that thought pattern and immediately redirect to your chosen state. When "I can't afford that" starts forming in your mind, you catch it midstream and replace it with "I am so grateful for the abundance that is mine." When "money is so tight this month" begins, you interrupt it with "everything I need flows to me effortlessly." This is where most people fail in their transformation journey, not because they don't know these principles, but because they practice them inconsistently. They do their visualization at night, but spend the entire day reinforcing poverty consciousness with their inner dialogue. They fall asleep in the wish fulfilled, but wake up in the state of lack. The shift requires commitment, a decision to maintain the new state regardless of what circumstances appear to be telling you. Here's a specific challenge that will accelerate your results dramatically. Commit to this mental diet for 7 days without interruption. 7 consecutive days where you refuse to entertain any thought that implies your wish is unfulfilled. You don't speak of lack in conversations. You don't complain about money to friends or family. You don't worry about bills or upcoming expenses. For one full week, you live in consciousness as the wealthy being you intend to become, and you do this so consistently that the old patterns begin to dissolve simply from lack of reinforcement. The impact of 7 days of pure mental discipline is profound because you're not just thinking different thoughts, you're actually becoming a different person. Your decisions change when you're operating from abundance consciousness rather than survival mode. The opportunities you notice multiply. The people you attract shift. Behind the scenes, invisible forces begin aligning circumstances to match your new state. And by the end of those 7 days, you'll see tangible evidence that this isn't just theory. If you're ready to commit to these 7 days starting right now, write in the comments, "Day 1 starts today," and let that public declaration strengthen your resolve. During these 7 days, you'll inevitably encounter what Murphy called tests. These are moments when your old consciousness attempts to reassert itself, when circumstances seem designed to pull you back into the familiar patterns of lack. You'll see an unexpected expense and feel that old anxiety rising. You'll hear someone complaining about the economy and feel yourself wanting to join in. You'll compare your situation to someone else's and feel that familiar pang of not having enough. These aren't obstacles to your transformation. They're opportunities to strengthen your new identity through conscious choice. When these tests come, and they will come, you move through them with a simple 4-step process that becomes automatic with practice. First, you recognize it. You say to yourself, here is a test. And that simple recognition breaks the automatic response pattern. Second, you refuse to complete the negative thought. You don't argue with it or analyze why it appeared. You just stop feeding it energy. Third, you redirect immediately to your assumption and say your sentence. Whether that's "Isn't it wonderful?" or "Thank you, Father," or whatever phrase you've chosen. And fourth, you give thanks for the reminder to practice, because each test is actually your consciousness giving you another chance to establish the new pattern more deeply. This transforms the entire journey from a struggle against unwanted thoughts into a practice of returning again and again to your chosen state. You're not fighting poverty consciousness, you're simply choosing abundance consciousness every time the old pattern appears. And with each choice, each redirection, each return to the state of fulfillment, the new neural pathways strengthen while the old ones weaken. There's another technique that accelerates this process beautifully, something that makes assuming the feeling of the wish fulfilled far easier than trying to manufacture emotions from nothing. Throughout your day, you'll experience moments of genuine happiness, peace, or satisfaction. The warmth of sunlight on your skin, the taste of your favorite food, the sound of someone you love laughing. These are real feelings that live in your body, feelings you know intimately. When these moments happen, pause for just a second and memorize how they feel. Notice where in your body you experience them, the quality of the sensation, the subtle shift in your breathing or your posture. Then, when you're doing your practice at night, when you're repeating your sentence and dwelling in the end, you transfer these same sensations to your imaginal scene of abundance fulfilled. You're not trying to create feelings from nothing. You're borrowing feelings you already know and applying them to a new context. This bypasses the analytical mind completely because you're not imagining what wealth might feel like someday. You're using actual feelings of satisfaction and peace and joy that you've already experienced, and your subconscious receives this as real, as genuine, as true. If you're seeing how practical and doable this actually is, write in the comments, "I'm capturing the feeling," because that phrase itself helps anchor this technique in your awareness. This process of capturing feelings throughout the day supports the most crucial practice of all, the nightly ritual that directly impresses your subconscious with the pattern of your desire. After you've prepared for bed and turned off the lights, you lie flat on your back with your eyes closed. You begin relaxing your body muscle. By muscle, starting from your feet and moving upward, letting a drowsy heaviness descend upon you. You're entering that sacred threshold between waking and sleeping, the state where the conscious mind loosens its grip and the subconscious becomes receptive to new impressions. In this drowsy state, you construct a brief scene in your imagination, but here's the critical distinction that most people miss. You don't imagine receiving the money or winning the lottery or getting the check. You imagine something that takes place after your desire is already fulfilled. Perhaps you're sitting with someone you love, discussing the generous gift you're about to give them. Perhaps you're standing in the kitchen of your new home, feeling the cool countertop under your hand. Perhaps you're looking at a receipt for a donation you just made to a cause you care deeply about. The scene must be brief, simple, and most importantly, it must be first person. You're not watching yourself in this scene like a movie. You're living it, experiencing it through your own eyes, feeling it in your own body. You make this scene as vivid and sensory as possible, using those feelings you've been capturing throughout the day. You feel textures, hear sounds, smell scents. You let it loop over and over until it becomes natural and real, until the boundary between imagination and reality begins to blur. And as you feel yourself drifting towards sleep, you speak your sentence silently. Isn't it wonderful? Or whatever phrase you've chosen. You let this be your last conscious thought, the final impression you make before surrendering to sleep. And your subconscious accepts this as instruction, as blueprint, as the pattern it must now work to externalize in your waking reality. But the transformation doesn't end when you wake up. Manifestation isn't something you do for 15 minutes at bedtime and then forget about for the rest of the day. It's a full-time occupation, a continuous state of being. The assumption must be maintained throughout your waking hours, not just during deliberate practice. The moment you wake up, before you even open your eyes, you take a moment to feel grateful. Not for what you hope to receive in the future, but for what you've already received in imagination. You say to yourself, "Thank you for this abundant day," setting the tone before you even leave your bed. You're assuming that you're entering a day of blessing and provision, that you're moving through your hours as someone who already has everything they need. This decision about how you begin your day has an impact far beyond what most people realize, because it establishes the foundation from which every subsequent decision and perception will flow. If this nightly and daily practice is becoming clear and you're ready to implement it consistently, write in the comments, "My ritual begins tonight," as a commitment to yourself and to this journey. As you move through your day, maintaining this state, circumstances will inevitably arise that seem to contradict your assumption. An unexpected bill arrives in the mail. An unplanned expense appears out of nowhere. You hear troubling news about the economy or see something that triggers that old familiar anxiety about money. These moments are where the real transformation happens, where theory becomes practice, where understanding becomes embodiment. In every single one of these moments, you have a choice that determines whether you're strengthening the new pattern or feeding the old one. The practice is elegantly simple. Even when circumstances feel overwhelming, you pause, even if just for a breath. You don't need to make a big production of it or find a quiet room to meditate. Just a momentary pause that creates space between stimulus and response. You breathe, bringing yourself back into your body and out of the mental spiral that circumstances can trigger. And then you return to the feeling, to the state of fulfillment, to the knowing that all is well. You speak your sentence silently, whether you're standing in line at the bank or sitting in traffic or lying awake at 3 in the morning. "Isn't it wonderful?" becomes your anchor, your way of choosing the new state over the old pattern. The key is that you don't argue with the circumstances. You don't try to explain away the sensory evidence or convince yourself that the bill isn't real or the expense doesn't exist. You acknowledge what's in front of you, and then you choose a different relationship with it. You simply return to the state again and again, as many times as necessary. This isn't about denying reality. It's about choosing which reality you're going to give your creative attention to, which state you're going to feed with your consciousness. There's another practice that works in beautiful harmony with this daily vigilance, something that happens at the end of each day, before you begin your nightly ritual. You take a few moments to review your day, noticing where you maintained the state of fulfillment and where you fell from it. You observe without judgment where circumstances pulled you back into poverty consciousness, where you spoke from lack instead of abundance, where you responded from fear instead of faith. But here's what makes this practice transformative rather than just self-criticism. You don't condemn yourself for these moments. You revise them. In your imagination, you see those same moments differently. You watch yourself responding from abundance rather than lack, speaking from fulfillment rather than fear, choosing the new state instead of defaulting to the old pattern. This isn't just mental rehearsal for next time. This practice of revision actually corrects the impressions those moments made on your subconscious during the day. It trains your mind to respond differently in the future by literally rewriting the past in consciousness. And consciousness is where all creation happens first, before it solidifies into circumstance. If you're understanding how these daily practices work together to create lasting transformation, write in the comments, "I'm revising my story," because that's exactly what you're doing at the deepest level. The power of maintaining this state, even when circumstances appear utterly hopeless, reveals itself most dramatically in moments of crisis. There was a woman who came to Murphy in absolute desperation. She was behind on her rent with only 3 days until eviction. She had no money saved, no family to turn to, no conceivable solution to her situation. Every logical assessment of her circumstances screamed impossibility. She asked Murphy the question that most people in her position would ask: how can I assume the feeling of having when I'm about to lose everything? Murphy's response cut through all the complexity and got to the heart of the matter. He asked her to close her eyes and imagine that a miracle had happened overnight. If she woke up tomorrow morning and discovered that her rent was paid, her apartment was secure, and she had nothing to worry about, how would she feel? She let herself sink into that imaginal scene, and something shifted in her body. A smile appeared on her face. Her shoulders relaxed, her breathing deepened. She said she would feel relieved, peaceful, deeply grateful. Murphy told her to feel that way now, not because her circumstances had changed, but because she had decided to change her state for the next 3 days. She maintained that feeling of relief and gratitude as if the problem was already solved. On the morning of the 3rd day, something inexplicable happened. A neighbor from down the hall, a man she had spoken to maybe twice in the 2 years she'd lived in that building, knocked on her door holding an envelope. He told her he'd been counting his savings that morning and kept feeling compelled to give her something. He didn't even know her situation. Inside the envelope was the exact amount she needed for her rent, to the penny. This is consciousness at work, creating what Murphy called bridges of incidents, arranging circumstances through channels that could never have been predicted or forced. To understand how this is even possible, you need to grasp a fundamental truth about reality that changes everything. Imagine you're standing in a room filled with millions of radio signals right now. Music, news broadcasts, conversations in 100 languages, all of it present in the space around you, passing through you, but completely inaudible. The room appears silent. Why? Because you don't have a radio tuned to receive those signals. But the moment you turn on a radio and tune to a specific frequency, suddenly sound fills the air. Did turning on the radio create the music? Of course not. The music was always there. The radio simply tuned into what already existed. Your consciousness works exactly the same way. The states of wealth, health, love, success, these aren't things you need to create or earn or become worthy of. They're frequencies that are always broadcasting, always available, always present. When you assume the feeling of the wish fulfilled, you're not creating something new. You're tuning into what already exists. This is what Murphy meant when he taught that creation is finished. If this is revealing a completely new way of understanding how manifestation actually works, write in the comments, "I'm tuning in," because that simple phrase captures this entire revelation. Everything you've learned so far comes together in understanding why that specific moment between waking and sleeping holds such extraordinary power. During your waking hours, your conscious mind is active, analytical, constantly evaluating and judging everything through the filter of past experience and current circumstances. It's the voice that says, "Be realistic," and "That's impossible," and "Look at the facts." But as you begin to drift towards sleep, something remarkable happens. That critical faculty starts to relax its grip. The analytical mind loosens its hold. The door between your conscious awareness and your subconscious creative power opens wide. This is the sacred threshold that mystics and teachers throughout history have recognized as the moment of greatest creative potential. Whatever impression you make during this drowsy state sinks into your subconscious deeply and without resistance. There's no mental committee arguing about whether it's possible or realistic or deserved. Your assumptions pass unhindered into the creative depths of your being, where they're accepted as instructions, as blueprints, as the patterns that must now be externalized into your waking reality. This is why Murphy emphasized falling asleep in the state of the wish fulfilled rather than just visualizing during the day when your conscious mind is fully active and ready to object. The journey through this transformation inevitably brings you face to face with doubt, and understanding how to handle doubt without giving it power is crucial. Doubt is natural. It's the voice of your old poverty consciousness, the accumulated patterns of years or decades, and it won't surrender without attempting to reassert itself. You'll be maintaining your state beautifully, feeling abundant and grateful and fulfilled. And then a thought will arise. Who are you kidding? Look at your bank account. This isn't working. These doubts will appear, sometimes multiple, at times a day, especially in the beginning. The hidden truth that most people miss is that fighting doubt actually strengthens it. When you argue with doubtful thoughts, when you try to prove them wrong or analyze why they appeared, you're engaging with them on their own terms. You're treating them as legitimate concerns that deserve your attention and energy. Instead, the practice is elegantly simple. You notice the doubt without judgment, and then you return to your chosen state. Doubt says, "Your bank account is empty." You don't respond with, "Yes, but I'm working on changing that," or "The money is coming soon." You respond not with argument, but with your sentence. Isn't it wonderful? You're not trying to convince the doubt or prove anything to it. You're simply choosing a different frequency, tuning to a different station entirely. This decision to notice and redirect rather than engage and fight creates a completely different relationship with doubt. It stops being this overwhelming obstacle that derails your practice and becomes simply another opportunity to choose your state consciously. Behind the scenes, each time you make this choice, you're weakening the old neural pathways and strengthening the new ones. If you're seeing how this transforms your relationship with doubt from enemy to teacher, write in the comments. Doubt is just a test, because recognizing it as such removes its power completely. The power of this practice becomes undeniable when you see it working in situations where all conventional paths seem closed. There was a man who worked for a large bank, middle-aged, and feeling completely stuck. His superiors had made it crystal clear that no advancement was possible within the organization. They even suggested, not unkindly, that if he was dissatisfied, he should look elsewhere. But he had children to educate, a lifestyle to maintain, and his current income wasn't sufficient for either. He came to Murphy frustrated and anxious, caught between the need for more and the apparent impossibility of getting it. Murphy asked him what he truly wanted, not what seemed possible, but what he deeply desired. The man confessed that his dream was to manage investments for a major institution, a foundation or university, something with real responsibility and compensation to match. But he dismissed it immediately as fantasy. Those positions were rare, reserved for people with connections and advantages he didn't have. Murphy gave him a specific practice that cut through all the logical objections. Each night as he fell asleep, he was to imagine himself at the end of the most successful day of his career, feeling the satisfaction of having just accepted exactly the position he desired, with exactly the kind of organization he yearned to work for. The man did this faithfully through December and January, not knowing how it would happen, not trying to figure out the path, just maintaining the assumption that it was already done. In early February, a director from one of the wealthiest foundations in the world called him. A stranger, someone who had no logical reason to know his name or his situation. The offer was for an executive position handling investments, everything he had been living in imagination, with income that exceeded even what he had dared to hope for. The opportunity appeared out of nowhere, orchestrated by forces operating behind the scenes of visible reality. This brings us to something even deeper than technique, to the mystical foundation that makes all of this work. When you say "I am," you're using the creative name of God that was revealed to Moses at the burning bush. This isn't religious doctrine. It's operational truth about consciousness. Every single time you complete the phrase "I am" with any condition, you're wielding the universe's creative power. "I am wealthy" and "I am poor" are both creative commands with equal force. The difference is only in what you're commanding into existence. The "I am" at the center of your consciousness isn't separate from the divine creative power that spoke worlds into existence. It is that power, expressing through the unique filter of your individual awareness. When you truly grasp this, when you understand that you're not petitioning some distant deity, but exercising the God power within your own being, everything about how you approach life transforms. You stop begging and start decreeing. You stop hoping and start knowing. You stop identifying with limitation and start claiming your inheritance as consciousness itself. If this is shifting something fundamental in how you see yourself and your relationship to creative power, write in the comments, "I am awakening," because those 3 words carry the entire truth of this teaching. This awakening to your true nature as consciousness itself is beautifully captured in one of the most profound parables ever told. The prodigal son had left his father's house and squandered his inheritance in a distant country, living among strangers, feeding on scraps, convinced he had lost everything. But when he decided to return home, something remarkable happened. His father didn't wait at the door with lectures about responsibility or lessons about the value of money. The father ran to meet him while he was still a long way off, clothed him in the finest robe, put a ring on his finger, and threw a feast in his honor. Why? Because the son had never stopped being a son. He had only forgotten. His identity, his inheritance, his place in the Father's house had never been revoked. In the moment of remembering who he truly was, he was restored to everything he had always possessed. You are that prodigal son. You've been wandering in the far country of poverty consciousness, believing yourself separated from abundance, convinced you need to earn or deserve or qualify for what is already yours by nature. But your Father, which is the infinite consciousness expressing as your very being, is running toward you right now, The robe is ready, the ring is waiting, the feast has been prepared. All you must do is remember. Let this be your declaration, the sentence that captures everything you've learned and transforms it into living truth. I am the consciousness of wealth. What I assume, I become. What I feel within, I see without. It is not coming. It is already here. I have always been abundant. I was simply dreaming I was poor. And now I awake. Say these words to yourself right now and feel the shift they create. You're not trying to get rich. You're waking up from the dream of poverty. The alarm has sounded. The sun has risen. The long night is over. Tonight, as you lie in bed and enter that drowsy state between waking and sleeping, you know exactly what to do. You construct your scene of fulfilled desire, not receiving the abundance but living from it. You speak your sentence with feeling, whether it's, "Isn't it wonderful?" or "Thank you, Father," or "It is done." You feel the feeling of satisfaction and gratitude and completion. You let that be your last conscious thought as you drift into sleep. And you understand now that the lottery was won the moment you assume the feeling of winning. Everything else is just the visible confirmation of an invisible fact. The journey doesn't end here. It begins here. Every moment from now on is an opportunity to choose your state, to speak from the end, to claim what has always been yours. The impact of this decision will ripple through every area of your life in ways you can't yet imagine. If you're ready to begin this journey tonight, if you're committing to these practices starting right now, write in the comments, "I am claiming my abundance," and let that declaration be the first step of your transformation. If you've made it this far, you're not here by accident. Something in you recognized the truth in these words, and that recognition itself is evidence that you're ready for this transformation. The fact that you stayed through this entire teaching tells me you're serious about changing your relationship with abundance, about waking up from the dream of limitation and claiming what's always been yours. I create content like this because I believe these principles shouldn't remain hidden in dusty books or academic discussions. They need to be shared, practiced, lived. If this resonated with you, if you found value in what we explored together today, I'd be grateful if you'd subscribe to the channel. There's so much more to dive into, so many layers of this truth to uncover, and I don't want you to miss what's coming next. Leave a comment below saying, "This message was meant for me," if you feel like this video found you at exactly the right moment. I read every single comment, and there's something powerful about declaring your readiness publicly. It's another way of claiming your transformation. And if you take a moment to hit that like button, it helps more people discover these teachings. Someone out there right now is searching for exactly what you just learned, and your simple action of liking this video might be the bridge that connects them to their breakthrough. Before you go, there's another video I think you'll find incredibly valuable. It takes what we discussed today even deeper, showing you how to handle the specific challenges that arise when you start practicing these principles. Click on it and continue this journey with me. I'll see you there.